I'm the director of the Centre for European Research at Queen Mary University of London. My name is Sarah Wolf, and we are very happy to have been awarded the Jean Monnet Centre of Excellence Prize from the European Commission Erasmus Plus program. Our research project is on the future of EU-UK relations, and we are here today at Europe House to have a policy roundtable to discuss the future of this relationship between the EU and the UK, what have been the EU member states' strategic behavior during the negotiations. But also later on, we have Pauline Schnapper from the University of Sorbonne Nouvelle in Paris, who will come and give a speech about her research on Brexit and what it means for British democracy.
I think the best way to describe it would be principled pragmatism. There's a lot of sadness, obviously, in Berlin that the UK has voted to leave. However, very quickly there was a desire to make sure that British departure was not going to damage in any way the integration project, which I would suggest is the most important national interest that Germany has. And so its approach to the negotiations, the support it's provided to the European Commission, to the other institutions, its own pronouncements on this topic have all been about maintaining the integrity of the single market and ensuring that the UK's departure, whether negotiated or even through a sort of chaotic no deal, would cause minimum damage to the EU. I think the presidency of von der Leyen does pose something of a challenge for Berlin. The Commission President traditionally, as with all commissioners, but particularly the Commission President, has to be seen to be rising above national interest and really representing the common interest of the whole of the European Union. How Germany manages that process, particularly given the previous German representative on the Commission was very good at supporting German interests whilst playing the sort of the broader common game, that remains to be seen. And I think that's going to be a challenge that will depend as well on the successor to Merkel and how effectively they are able to manage the relationship with the Commission and more broadly manage their resources they have to exercise influence.
This is a general election in which foreign policy or change of direction for British foreign policy is probably has more at stake than any recent general election, not just because of the EU or the relationship with the EU, but also because the Labour and Conservative parties stand for quite different visions of their relationship with the outside world for foreign policy. So in the case of the Conservative Party, probably a looser relationship in that area. In the case of the Labour Party, probably closer because they're more interested in conflict and crisis management type foreign policy, which is closer to the way the EU is developing its capacity for involving itself overseas. Well, one of the consequences of the UK leaving the EU is that some of its abilities or its assets, military and intelligence-wise, are therefore not available to the EU directly as it's no longer a member state. And one of the parts of the future relationship negotiations will really be how close the UK might be with the EU in that area. So if the UK was to have a very detached relationship, then it means they're probably not available to the EU, or certainly on very circumscribed terms. A closer relationship probably means that they would be more available or more at the service of the European Union. So everything probably hangs on the nature of the depth of relationship in the future relationship agreement. Well, one of the things that the Brexit vote, the referendum vote, and the subsequent negotiations have done is to change the politics of Northern Ireland, and particularly have given people a different identity on top of their previous community identities. The question really is to how the Irish government and the people of Northern Ireland think about what their relationship is to be in the future. In particular, the question as to whether you have a reunification of Ireland, not something that happens in the short term, but in the medium or long term. Do you have that shift of identity which comes as a consequence of a different relationship between Northern Ireland to the UK and a different relationship between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic?
Well, Paris was seen as tough, especially in this country, but really its main aims for the negotiation was to respect the vote of the British people, even though, of course, it wasn't happy with its outcome with Brexit, and mostly to reduce the negative consequences for the EU. I think the French government's main priority was to protect the EU and the single market in particular. That was really its main aim. It's hard to say. Since the French government's view has been lately that since Brexit should happen as quickly as possible now, that it's gone on, the negotiations have gone on for too long, I suppose the least bad option would be to have a Conservative majority so that Brexit can be done. And the deal, the second deal that was negotiated last October can go through. And the next phase can start. That doesn't mean that there is necessarily a lot of support or trust for the current British Prime Minister, though. Well, I think a lot will depend on how the next phase of the negotiations go. Both countries' interest is to keep a very close relationship, not just on the economy, we are close trading partners, of course, but also on security aspects and defense. So the two countries have really a strong interest in maintaining a strong relationship, but that will only be possible, I think, if Brexit goes well and if the second phase of negotiations go well as well.